The last few weeks have been exciting ones here on our campus. We welcome back our students in our Aaron Milken Center, our youngest learners, and our Wise School students, kindergarten through sixth grade. And this Sunday, we're going to welcome back our Center for Youth Education families. We have Slichot this Saturday night, as Rabbi Stern mentioned earlier. There's a lot going on. One of the things that's really fun when the school year starts up again is to see how some of our fifth and sixth graders seem to have grown like 7-8 inches. Some of the boys are shaving, which is always a little disconcerting for a moment, but it is the way of the world. And it's fun that we get to have back to school come together so often with our High Holy Days, although I have to say, I'm not exactly sure why the good Lord chose to do it that way, because it puts an incredible amount of stress on us, but I'm sure God has plans for all of us. We work hard here at Stephen Wise Temple and through our schools to make sure that every student and every family feels included in our community. Everyone feels as if he or she belongs here, and I hope sincerely that you feel that way, and that those of you who are joining from home, that you feel that way. Belonging to community is a core value in our Jewish tradition. The great sage Hillel, all the way back during the time of the Mishnah, some 2,000 years ago, he put it very simply as a commandment: Al tifrosh min hatzibor. Do not separate yourself from the community. It's a mitzvah that devolves upon each of us individually, but it also devolves upon us as a community. Each one of us is commanded to attach herself to community, and the community is obligated to make room for each and every individual. I said at the beginning of the service, it was so delightful to see some little ones here, and I said, you can make all the noise you want. It's not going to bother me one bit. It might even distract people from some of the inadequacies of my sermon. So if you hear that, it's because I asked them to do that. But we want to make room for everyone. We want people to feel at home here and to feel welcomed. And that's part of our obligation as a community. Now, this week's Torah portion, Nitzavim, it's a double one, Nitzavim Vayelech, but I'm just going to focus on the first of those two parshiot, Nitzavim. It's a really beautiful one. We read it every year around this time, and then we read it again on Yom Kippur. So it might be familiar to you from that moment as well. It begins by reminding us just how radically inclusive the covenant between God and the Jewish people is. Everyone is part of it. From the leaders of the tribes, the big machers, to the people who carry the water and chop your wood, the simple laborers. It tells us from the youngest, in the Midrash actually says, it's not just the babies, it's actually the unborn babies in the wombs of their mother. They're included too, to the very oldest in our community. Every man and every woman too, which wasn't a small thing 3,000 years ago in a very patriarchal society, to say that everyone is concluded, women and men as well. And inclusivity really is at the heart of that relationship that our tradition wants us to have with God, because that covenant that's being cut, that covenant that's being made at that moment, is between God and all of us. Now, how do we ensure, though, that this is indeed experienced by everyone? It's one thing to say that this is a value and we care about it, but when the rubber hits the road, meets the road, it's really, how is this experienced by individuals in the community? And it's so often a challenge. You know, we want to be inclusive, we want to include every person, but when we actually come together, it's not always so easy. We don't always agree. I know I'm not sharing some terrible secret about the Jewish people or about any community for that matter. We don't always see eye to eye. In fact, sometimes we disagree profoundly, and not just about trivial things, but actually about core values, about matters of belief and practice. And the deep divisions that we're witnessing in Israel right now show us this. And we didn't need this moment to learn this, because we know throughout Jewish history this has happened again and again and again. Yet in this week's Torah portion, our sages discern a hint encoded in a key verse a hint that can actually teach us how to be more inclusive. And it's a really playful and fun interpretation, and I want to share that with you this evening. So this radically embracing covenant we hear about at the beginning of the Parsha, just a few verses in. God says in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 13, I make this covenant, this brit, with all of its sanctions, not with you alone. And then it goes on in the next verse to tell us, but both with those of you who are standing here with us today before our eternal God, and those who are not standing with us here this day. Now, this is radical inclusion, but it's also actually astonishing and strange, actually. Somehow, our covenant includes those who aren't there, who aren't in the room, who perhaps aren't even part of the community. And since we're talking about a legal document, I know we have some legal experts in the room. It's a strange way to make a contract because there are people who are obligated to be part of the contract who aren't even there, as it were, to sign it. Now, for some of the sages of our tradition, this verse that I just mentioned, I make this covenant with those who are here and those who aren't here, they understand this as something that really we should interpret as happening throughout time and space. Even though this covenant was made between God, Moses, and the Jewish people all those thousands of years ago, we are part of that covenant today. Just the other day, I had the great joy of being able, with Dr. Andy Spall, to officiate a Brit Milah ceremony. He did the surgery part. I did the prayers part. And the parents said about their little baby boy, we are going to enter him into the covenant of the Jewish people, Abraham and Sarah, lahachniso bevritam shel Avraham v'Sarah. They were doing it for him. But I think about that in this verse. Those who were standing there at Sinai, standing there when we were crossing over to the promised land, and the descendants coming thousands of years later, the children that are running around our sanctuary tonight, they were there too. It's radically inclusive. But how, again, do we do that? And the secret is found in the last letters of some of the key words in the verse. Those of you who are joining from home, you're going to see it, but for those of you in the room, I want you to try to visualize it. The three Hebrew words are et, asher, yeshno, po, which means those who are here. That verse that says, I make the covenant with those who are here with us today and those who are not here with us today. So et asher yeshno po. And what one of the commentators of our tradition does that's really kind of sweet and playful is take the last letter of each of those four Hebrew words. And so et, the last letter is tav. Asher, the last letter is a resh. Yeshno, it's a vav. And po, it's a hey. And if you take them, not in exact order, you have to invert two of them. It's tav, vav, resh, hey. What does that spell? Torah. It spells Torah. And it's so sweet. And again, it's playful. What's the secret of coming together and including and finding ways to make room for everybody? It's through study. It's through learning. It's through our master narrative. It's through the story of our people. It's through Torah, mitzvot. It's the secret sauce, the elixir that brings us all together. It's a tradition of learning. It's this master story. It's our most cherished values. And even when we disagree about the meaning of Torah, as we often do, even when we might find ourselves fighting with one another about its implications, somehow that process can, ideally, bring us and bind us together. And this is the beauty and the magic and maybe the reason for the coming together every year of back to school and the high holy days. Our children and our families and participants are not just coming back to community. We're returning to Torah, to learning as well. And look, I know this can be complicated. I know that sometimes the way we disagree about the meaning of Torah can literally divide us in actually profound ways. And all you have to do is look again at some of what's happening in Israel today, the incredible divisions between Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, and secular Jews. And some of those demonstrations, you really see that in fighting about army service and exemptions and taxes and other kinds of things. These are profound disagreements. And so I know it's not simple. And this can happen in the diaspora as well. Sometimes in our own communities, we find ourselves at odds with one another about matters of Torah. But instead of focusing on the way that Torah can sometimes divide us, I want to celebrate the way Torah often unites us. And I'll just ask you to think about in your own life, how many times have you found yourself traveling, you're somewhere, and you notice that that person's wearing a Jewish star or a chai or a chamsa, and you think, it's another member of the tribe. It's a fellow Jew, someone that I have a connection with. It's a profound sense of belonging, that sense of peoplehood. It's real. And in my experience, at least, it's much stronger than the ideological divides that we sometimes experience. And Torah is that secret sauce, that magic elixir that can bind us together. This shared history, this common destiny, it doesn't just help shape our individual identities, help us know who we are as people, but it also helps to shape our collective identity as well. And so I'll just end with a prayer that maybe can help lead us into Rosh Hashanah, into the new year, that our studies, that our learning, that our worship, that our coming together, hopefully again in person for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that all of this can remind us of how important it is to be in community and to make room for one another in community, to celebrate community, and to remain committed to community. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, and may this be our will as well. Shabbat Shalom.